episode 125 of the podcast. This week we're talking about trigger stacking. What is trigger stacking? How does that help us teach dogs to be good for grooming? Find out this week. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. This week we're talking about trigger stacking. Let's start with what is trigger stacking. Trigger stacking is when a number of triggers, stressors, distractions, etc. are all happening at the same exact time. And it's an important topic for the grooming setting. I think it's one of the problems that we have when we're looking at grooming, and a lot of training doesn't necessarily take that into account, that there's a lot happening all at once. One of the challenges is that there's just so much happening. And so we have noises, we have other dogs, we have people, we have being away from home, and all of those things are happening before we even take hold of the dog's leash, right? We had the car ride. For some dogs, that's already a problem, right? Getting in the car, getting a little bit car sick, all of these things have an impact on the grooming process, even if the behavior problem isn't necessarily showing up until we're grooming. Now, during the grooming process, now we have the dog who finds particular things difficult, right? All of those stressors, distractions, and triggers are being piled up on top of each other, and now we're grooming. So trigger stacking is really important for us to understand. Now I'm going to get into some examples, but first I want to have you thinking about how understanding that trigger stacking can help you teach dogs to be good for grooming. Because if we see a behavior change, if we observe that the dog is having a hard time, we can pause to think about all of the other stuff and things going on at the same time. And just pausing to think about it all. Then we can try to lessen, decrease, and or remove some of those other challenges. It also means that if we're sending people home with something to work on, we can be aware of what's going on in the grooming setting and what they can do at home. That might be working with less distractions at home. That might be building on your distractions when you're at home. When we're grooming, we sometimes lose sight of all the other stuff and things happening around us. Now, when a dog is having a hard time, it's easy for us to jump to assuming that they're responding to what we are doing or trying to get done. What a very common thing for us to do, right? Like, I'm trying to get this done and this dog is not cooperating, right? But what else is happening all at the same time, right? Can we make this easier? Because understanding trigger stacking will help you work with these dogs. Sometimes the response will be very different if we can adjust all of the other stuff and things happening around that. So we're going to get into a couple of examples. Let's just go with a quick, easy one. I want you to think about the dog that is getting really, really wiggly for their back foot. For whatever reason, it's their back foot. Now, in our mind, we're laser focused on what we're getting done. And that's really, really common. We're like, I'm trying to get this done, and this is the problem we're having. But what if we take a step back, pause, and take a look around us and see what else is going on? Because often there are other factors involved with that back foot. So what do I mean by that? One of those factors could be that there's another dog staring this dog down from another table, right? Not all dogs get along with other dogs. A lot of dogs don't enjoy the company of other dogs. A lot of dogs have had some really terrible things happen with other dogs, and I think we forget that, and there's a dog across the room on another table, or a dog being walked through the room, right? That could be one of the triggers on top of all of the other stuff. It could be that this dog has been having this endurance run, this long, lengthy process, and is really just spent. Tech talk. This dog is spent, right? This dog's attention level is gone now, right? Maybe earlier in the process, doing those back feet would be different for this dog. And that's why understanding trigger stacking can help inform us so that we know how we can proceed in the future or how we can continue today. Because maybe we'll say, you know what? I think in the future, we're just going to do these back feet before you're really tired, right? Save the time for looking at what the challenges are. Maybe we'll book you on a day that's not a Saturday when it's super, super busy. Maybe this dog is wildly overstimulated by everything going on around us. These things are really common. But like I said, so many of us people, because it's the way we think, when we are working on something and experience difficulty, we focus in on the thing we were working on. Which is why often when people ask me questions like, what do you do if a dog hates having his front legs done? Right? Like such a common one. Like, what do you do with the golden doodles who hate having their front legs done? And I have to gather more clues because trigger stacking is part of what's happening. What else is happening right then? And what does he do? What does he do when he hates having his front legs done? That doesn't give me enough information. So when we know that there's a lot happening all at once, then we can try to eliminate some of the other stuff that's going on in the background, right? Help this dog be better for the challenge that we're trying to get done. And we are trying to get something done, and I think sometimes trainers and non-groomers forget that part. They're like, well, does it really matter? Like, yeah, it really does. Maybe not today, but it'll matter in the future. Dogs have grooming needs, so we do need to work on it. We do need to help get them past it. And we need to figure out how we can do that while keeping them, and I know I've said it millions of times, you guys are ready to sing along, calm, comfortable, and cooperative, right? Because that's the ideal. That's the goal. We want a dog to be calm, comfortable, and cooperative. We want them to be able to hang out with us and let us do our stuff. Be the repositionable action figure, reposable, lift up a foot, guide the leg forward, all those other things. Let me look at your tail, let me move your ears around, let me touch you with stuff and things. But we can lower difficulty levels if we know that there's other stuff happening in the room. So let me give you another example. This one's another common example. We turn on the dryer, and now there's this loud noise, and the dog does something. Is it just the dryer, though? Is it just the loud noise of the dryer? It's hard to say, right? We need to look at the whole picture, right? The whole picture. And let me give you an example because this one happens quite a bit. We actually have a dog who's in the tub who's already a little nervous. Maybe they've been slipping around a little bit. Golden retrievers come to mind instantly. As dogs who are just like, I'm slipping around a little bit. They like good footing. I know that's, a lot of breeds like good footing, but they like good footing and they're slipping around a little bit. And then you turn on the dryer and they're like, enough of this baloney. Oh my God, she just made it harder, right? Like this was already hard. So think about it from a dog's point of view without being too anthropomorphic. I mean, we don't necessarily want to assume everything that they're thinking is something that we're understanding. But a lot of these dogs were having a hard time already, and then we turn on a high-velocity dryer, right? And we start thinking, boy, it was that dryer. Maybe it wasn't. So if we know about trigger stacking, if we know that there's a variety of things happening at any given point, right, then we can address a bunch of them. And what I mean by that is that same golden retriever who's in the tub, who suddenly went, oh my God, and now they're panicking. Sometimes even just putting down a paw mat is enough for that dog to be entirely different. Just a paw mat. Sometimes a happy hoodie is enough for that dog to be like, okay, it's not as distracting as it was. I'm back to something I can handle. I'm back to the amount of stressors and triggers that I was able to handle, and then that's loud noise. Now, if you think about triggers as being almost like blocks. Okay, I know, I'm probably showing my age, but like those little alphabet blocks when you were a kid, right? And you're trying to like stack them. You're trying to make like a pile of 6 and they topple over at like 7, I want you to think about trigger stacking as kind of a similar idea. If each of those little blocks is something that dog finds difficult, finds overstimulating, finds challenging, and it could be something that they're joyous about, just that it's a challenge for them to be groomed during it, right? So maybe that's someone playing with a dog on the other side of the room, or making noises over there in the corner, trying to get another dogs to perk their ears up so they can see if the trim's even, right? Whatever it is, these are difficulty levels. Can you, as a dog, handle what I'm doing while that other stuff is happening? So if those other stuff and things are building blocks, right? If you know this dog can only handle 6 things at once, you don't want to add the 7th, right? If we can think in those terms, we're like, okay, there's a lot going on. What can I decrease? What can I decrease? What can I lessen? What can I make less distracting? Perhaps it's something as simple as turning them around on your table so that they're not facing a distraction, right? Perhaps it's calming yourself down, right? We can be fast without being quick with them. And, I think I just opened a can of worms. We can be fast and efficient, but not necessarily look like we're stressed and moving fast. So my brush might be going fast, but I could be talking really slow and soothing and talking to them and like, hey, buddy, while my brush is going at an entirely different pace. And if that helps lower the stress, instead of like, dude, you got to stop it. You got to stop it. I just need to get this brush. I need to get this brush. I think we've all been there. Okay, non-groomers might not know what I'm talking about, but I think groomers, we've all been there. We're like, dude, I just got to get this done. Oh my God, I just stop sitting on your tail. Don't you know they're going to be here in 5 minutes, right? Even if like everything else is happening around us and we still need to be fast and efficient, sometimes if we can just bring it down, like, okay, what about my own physical actions and the way that this dog is perceiving me right now? I'm one of those blocks. I'm one of those triggers. I'm stacked in there too, right? If I can lessen that piece by saying like, oh, all right, hey, buddy, dude, I'm just brushing you while my brush is still going at whatever speed it needs to go, right? I mean, I think that non-groomers don't necessarily understand that sometimes we're working fast, right? Sometimes those clippers are all over the place, right? Sometimes we go from like foot to foot to foot to foot and we're moving around them and stuff. And there's other things happening in the room. And sometimes we need to look at everything. So that's trigger stacking, and why trigger stacking is important for us to know so that we can eliminate some of the triggers, so that we can backtrack and say, what else is happening right now? You know, maybe mommy shouldn't get you all wound up before you leave. Before she leaves, rather, before she drops you off. And I think we've all experienced that. Like, hey, can you have your husband drop off now? Or can you have your wife drop off now? Because it's that person who's like, it's okay, buddy. It's just a haircut. And they're all but crying on their way out the door. Like, oh God, I hope he's going to be okay without me, Like, that's a trigger. That's already setting this dog up for a stress level. And think about how many stress levels build on each other. Now, in the next part, I'm going to give you some human examples of trigger stackings to help really drive the point home that there are ways that we can lessen some of these triggers and help a dog feel better about what we're doing in that moment. Because sometimes, without all the other triggers, what you're going to find is that that's a dog who's like, oh yeah, sure, dry my ear, right? When nothing else is going on. They're like, yeah, okay. Those are the dogs whose owners say, I don't know, I don't understand, he's fine at home. Yeah, because he's in front of his refrigerator and nothing else is happening. He's not in a busy grooming shop. So in the next part, we're going to give some human examples. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes, and tell all of your friends. Trigger stacking with humans. So one of my examples for people is you're driving. It's a rainy night. The roads are really kind of slick. The visibility stinks. You're on an exit ramp and your car hydroplanes a little. Just a little bit. Like you feel it slip off the road a little bit. We all handle that differently. And even though normally you're like, I like driving. Maybe you do like driving. Maybe you don't. I like driving. Normally I'm like, hey, I like driving. So now I'm driving and the car slips a little bit. The visibility's bad. It's raining, lots of stuff happening. Let's say it's even at night. Okay, so now we're adding, it's nighttime, it's raining, visibility is really bad, the wipers on high are barely taking care of it, and you just hydroplaned. All of those things stack together. And different individuals handle all of those things differently. And what do we do? What do we do? And I'm going to say I use this example with owners a lot, and most people agree with me that what we do, as soon as we've skidded a little bit, All right, we get the car back under control. What we do is we try to lessen one of those stressors, right? Generally, this is the human experience. Like, whoa, there's a lot going on right now. One of those things that we do is we tell the kids to be quiet. Okay, everybody needs to be quiet because I need you to concentrate on the road. Right? I don't have kids, but God, I remember my mom doing that. Like, everybody needs to be quiet. I need to concentrate on the road right now, right? If you're driving alone, turn down the radio. Why? Why would turning down the radio have any effect on your driving, right? Because it's another distraction level. It's another difficulty level because we know we need to focus in better on what is happening right now. So if you think about like lowering the radio, right? We probably like shake it off a little bit like, whew, okay, that was a close call. Whew, put the hands on the wheel, probably 2 hands on the wheel, probably put down your cup of coffee or your drink or whatever. And like, okay, now I need to get serious. I can't be thinking about my drink. I can't be singing to the radio. I can't be talking to anybody in my car. Just, whew, right? We need to lower those stressors so that we can reestablish like, okay, no, this is fine. This is safe. By the end of the drive, you're probably fine. And then there are other people who are like, I'm going to pull off to the side of the road and get some air. Like, I just need to pull off someplace and calm down, right? And don't you find that that's really individual? Because we all are very different people, and our animals are very different too, right? What is fine for one dog might be really overwhelming for another, and some of that overwhelm is trigger stacking. Some of that overwhelm that we experience in this weird grooming setting is that there's so much happening all at once. So, in the case of that driving and your car skidded and, some people do not recover from that well at all. Some people are going to be afraid the next time they get in the car. And I want you to think about that, right? We do this as humans. And I know I'm being anthropomorphic by attributing some of these thoughts to our dogs, but don't we observe it, right? Can't we relate to it? That like, yeah, I also have experienced something that made me go, ooh, I'm not real sure. I used to be confident about this drive, but then a deer jumped out in front of my car, and that terrible crash that we had because of our freaking deer, right? And as another example, if you've ever had something like that was just so random, I had a deer jump in front of my car, and I'm not a particularly nervous person, but I'll tell you what, it does something, because now you're kind of seeing like you're driving along and you're noticing like that hedge, and you're like, I can't see past it. Can't see past it. What if something jumps at me? Right? Maybe it's a matter of dusk and dawn. Maybe it's the time of day that happened, that you're a little extra edgy. You're driving, but you're like a little extra edgy, right? Maybe it's that stretch of road that you just can't quite let go of it. Like that's that stretch of road and oh man, that freaking deer. I know deer passed through here, and it was only one event. A road you have driven down over and over and over again, one single event learning, one single event was enough for you to be like, I don't know, man, this has changed. This has changed for me. And all of those distraction levels, those are different for everybody, right? So the distraction level for the driving and looking for deer could be big bushes, blind corners, right? Where you just can't see what's coming up and you can't see what's over there. Right now, that's a trigger for you, right? The time of day, the whatever it is about the driving conditions, right? So I think that we can relate to all these multiple triggers. Now, to give you a grooming shop example, all right? So now you get into work, and let's say the first customer of the day gets you all riled up. Right? They're like, last time, and we didn't complain or anything, but you can't do it that way like last time. And we're like, last time was 6 months ago. So you're going to have to tell me what you want today. Well, not what you did last time. Right? And your frustration starts. But that customer alone isn't enough to throw off your day. But then you go in and you spill your coffee on the floor and now you have no coffee. All right, now it's getting worse. But spilling your coffee on the floor alone, that wasn't going to kill your day, right? Then you come over and you find out your clipper's not working right. Okay, now you're starting to panic a little bit, like, oh man, now I have to go grab my backup clipper. Why isn't my clipper working right? And you start adding in your mind how much money that's going to be to get that fixed if it needs to be repaired. And you're like, okay, now I've got 3 things that have happened this morning. Trigger stacking. okay? And you start to change throughout that day because more and more stuff is happening. Stuff and things that are distraction levels and difficulty levels, and they're building and building and building. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about trigger stacking. And so any one of those things might make you sad, right? Like they might be upsetting, but they're not going to ruin your whole day. It's all of the stuff added together, right? All of the stuff added together. Now, the next little tiny thing that happens, you're going to have a different response to than you normally would. That's all, right? You're going to have a more dramatic response because you're already stressed. You're already having a bad day. You're already having a difficult day. You're already having a challenging day. You're having a hard time. And the next thing that happens, no matter how small, I can't find a pen, and you're entirely different about not being able to find a pen. Now, in grooming, when a dog gets to a point where they're like, okay, I've kind of hit my wall, man. This is all I can handle. Like all those things happened, and now I'm like, God, is this day ever going to end, right? They're you when you can't find a pen after all of that stuff happens, right? But we start thinking like, wow, she is really crazy when she can't find a pen. Right? That's where we go to. We're like, I've never seen anyone get so upset about not being able to find a pen to take down a message. That's crazy, right? But that's not what it was. It was all of the other stuff building and building and building and building. But we do that with our dogs. We're like, boy, that nail trim. But maybe the nail trim was the last thing that you did, and everything else had been building and building and building, and this dog was stressed out because everything else had been building and building and building all day long. And by the end of the day, anything you did to him, if you had gone back to start brushing on his hip again, he would have been like, rah, 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 rah. Stop brushing my hip, I'm done, So trigger stacking is really important for us to know. And it's really important for non-groomers to know, because there is so much happening in the average grooming setting. Now that's a shop, that's even a mobile or house call, because I'll tell you, as house call, these dogs are still being picked up by somebody who's not mommy and daddy. They're being put on a grooming table, they're being put in the tub, they're being dried, they're brushed, all those other things. If they have other dogs in the house, now the other dogs they're allowed to run free. How come I gotta be up here? So it's always happening. There's always a bunch of triggers. Now I will say one of the fun things about house call is that there are less triggers. Like it's easier to manage some of that environment. Right? There's a little bit less. Dogs that get car sick aren't going for a car ride, which is actually a lot of my customers. Like some of them, I found them because their dogs get car sick. So there are lots of ways for us to look at all of these triggers, and can we lessen those? Can we make that dog's day in general better? And if there's something particularly difficult, can we change when we do it? Can we change where we do it? Right? Like for some dogs, if you do their nails in the bathtub, they're fine. And honestly, we can that's a whole can of worms too, but I kind of think that some of that is because they're in the tub and they don't feel like they're going to fall off. That's a little anthropomorphic, but what's really different about the tub from the table is that the tub is surrounded by 4 walls. So some dogs are going to be better for things in different areas. Fine, right? If they're better for trimming around their eyes and getting that area around their eyes while they're wet, then maybe we should do that for a while to get them used to it, to make it easier, because this is a lifelong process. Dogs are going to have grooming needs for their entire life. So if we're aware of the number of stressors all happen at the same time, all of those triggers for the particular dog, and many of them are the same for lots of dogs, so we can think of lots of different types of triggers. So if we are thinking about how many triggers we have and just how much this dog can handle, and can we lessen those? Can we make those triggers less triggering? Can we teach that dog about those triggers individually so that those things don't bother the dog in the future? So there are lots of ways that trigger stacking and understanding trigger stacking can help us in the grooming setting, and for teaching dogs to be good for a grooming setting if you are a non-groomer. If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy at happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast or the Facebook page Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.